What the hell do you think you're doing in my son's bedroom? Michael Sterling's voice thundered across the polished marble hallway, loud enough to rattle the chandelier above. Rain clung to his overcoat, his shoes dripping on the pristine floor of the Sterling mansion. But he wasn't cold. He was burning. Before him, in the soft glow of a night lamp shaped like a crescent moon, knelt Amara Johnson, her hand gently resting on Caleb's trembling back. Her body curled protectively between the two sleeping twins. Caleb and Noah, 8 years old, curled like frightened animals beneath their covers, had been crying out in their sleep, their small bodies restless with nightmares. Amara had rushed in, barefoot and quiet, answering their fear with the kind of warmth their father hadn't offered in months. But to Michael Sterling, a man drowning in grief and trapped in the walls of his own perfection, it looked like a violation, a stranger, in the dark, touching his children. "Get out!" he snapped. "You're done! You were never qualified to be here!" His voice cracked with more than rage. Amara slowly rose, her heart pounding, not from guilt, but from disbelief. She didn't try to explain, not with the boys still shaking behind her. She just looked at him, eyes steady, voice calm, and said, "You think credentials heal children, Mr. Sterling?" He didn't answer. He just turned and walked away, his jaw tight, the storm behind him no louder than the one inside. "Before we go any further, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. We love hearing from you. And if you believe stories like this matter, hit the like button and subscribe. Now, let's rewind. Let me show you how it all began, 2 weeks earlier. Amara Johnson had walked into that glass and steel mansion in Palo Alto with nothing but a tablet, a pen, and a file folder labeled Sterling, Caleb, and Noah. She was 34, black, and didn't wear a designer suit. What she did carry was a heavy silence and the kind of strength you don't learn in college. Born in South LA, raised in foster care, and orphaned by 16. She'd spent her entire adult life holding other people's children when no one else would. That's why the email from the Sterling household had surprised her. Not just because of who Michael Sterling was, the CEO of Nexora, one of Silicon Valley's most influential AI companies, but because the twins had burned through 4 nannies and 2 child psychologists in less than a year. After their mother, Rachel Sterling, died in a car accident the previous spring. The boys had changed. Caleb had stopped speaking in full sentences. Noah refused to sleep without the lights on. Both had become guarded, volatile, and difficult to reach. And Michael? He had done what powerful men do when grief knocks. He buried himself in work and called it resilience. From the first meeting, the tension was sharp. Michael eyed Amara with that clipped corporate tone reserved for people he didn't trust. "I expected someone with a PhD, he said flatly. "Degrees don't hug children in the dark." She replied. Eleanor Hayes, the longtime housekeeper, had smiled quietly at that. She'd seen many come and go. Amara was different. She didn't come in with games and therapy buzzwords. She simply sat near the boys, observed, waited, and slowly, so slowly, it began. Caleb started sketching in front of her. Noah brought her a stuffed bear one evening and said, "It's afraid of thunder, too." Amara didn't push. She just listened. Sometimes that's all trauma needs, a place to be heard. But Michael didn't see that. He saw a woman without letters behind her name, getting too close. He resented how the boys looked for her before him. He mistook their trust for manipulation. So, when he walked in that night, lightning still flickering behind the glass wall overlooking the infinity pool, he saw only what fear and pride allowed him to see. Intrusion. And so, he fired her, just like that. No conversation, no thank you, no recognition of how far the boys had come in just 2 weeks. Amara didn't cry. She didn't beg. She walked down the long hallway, past the steel staircase and the soundproof home office, past the ghost of Rachel's laugh that still clung to the walls, and out into the rain. The automatic gate didn't even close behind her. Michael never looked back. Inside the house. Noah stirred. "Where'd she go?" he mumbled, reaching out to no one. Caleb didn't answer. But when Eleanor brought them breakfast the next morning, the bear was missing. And Michael? He'd never forget the look Amara gave him that night. It wasn't anger, it was pity. The kind that said, "You don't even know what you just threw away." But fate has a strange way of circling back. The silence in the Sterling mansion the day after Amara left was the kind that pressed against the windows like fog. Quiet, heavy, and unwelcome. The twins barely touched their breakfast, and when Eleanor tried to draw them into small talk, Noah pushed his plate away and walked upstairs without a word. Caleb followed, head down, bear still missing. Michael Sterling, buried in a Zoom meeting with European investors, didn't notice at first, but over the next 3 days, he began to feel it. The shift, the absence, the color that had crept back into the house, quiet laughter, tentative drawings on the kitchen counter, someone humming as she folded laundry, was gone. All that remained was sterile silence, like an empty server waiting for code. On the 4th day, Michael passed Caleb's bedroom and paused. The boy sat in the window seat, staring at the clouds. A sketch pad lay untouched on his lap. Michael knocked softly. "Hey, buddy." Caleb didn't look at him. "Is she coming back?" he asked without turning. Michael froze. "Who?" Caleb said nothing, but his fingers tightened around the edge of the sketch pad. Later that night, Eleanor entered the home office and placed a single post-it on Michael's desk. It read, "You were wrong. Fix it." She didn't wait for a response. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in the master bedroom, surrounded by echoes of a life that no longer made sense. Rachel's favorite books still in the shelves, her perfume faint in the walk-in closet, but no warmth left in the world. Guilt crept in like a draft beneath the door. By morning, he had made a decision. He found her name in the personnel file and tracked her to a community center in Oakland. Not some office with glass partitions, but a red brick building with a cracked basketball court, a garden overrun with vines, and music blasting from a window that had no screen. Inside, the walls were covered in murals, portraits of brown and black children, sunflowers, fists raised in color. And there she was, in paint-splattered jeans and a denim jacket. Amara knelt beside a teenage girl working on a canvas. She didn't notice Michael until he cleared his throat. She didn't flinch, just looked up slowly, eyes unreadable. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Michael swallowed, realizing he had no rehearsed speech. "I wanted to apologize." Amara stood up, wiping her hands on a towel. "That's a start." He looked around. The space was alive, raw, and honest. Everything his mansion wasn't. "The boys, they've been quiet since you left," he admitted. "They miss you." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" He hesitated. "I don't know what I miss anymore," he said honestly. "But I know I made a mistake." Amara crossed her arms. "I'm not a nanny. Mr. Sterling. I never was." "I know," he said. "You were what they needed. And you fired that," she replied flatly. In front of them, no explanation, no respect. Michael looked down. "You're right." The teenage girl beside them glanced between the two adults, then turned back to her painting. After a long pause, Amara spoke again. "If I come back, there will be conditions." Michael looked up. Of course. No surveillance in their rooms. No silent dismissals. I eat dinner with them, and you eat with us. No phones. No distractions. Just people. He blinked. Dinner? Yes. You remember what that is, right? A flicker of a smile touched her lips. And the boys help make the rules. House rules. Together. Michael nodded. Agreed. She paused. This doesn't mean I trust you. Understood. But the boys come first. Always. He extended a hand. Amara didn't take it. You can shake my hand when you prove it. That evening, the Sterling kitchen smelled like garlic and burned toast. Caleb and Noah stood on stools, helping Eleanor stir pasta sauce while Amara taught them how to chop basil. Michael entered slowly, unsure where to stand. Amara motioned to a chair. You're late. Sit. Dinner was awkward at first. The boys didn't say much, and Michael kept glancing at his phone until Amara gently slid it into a nearby drawer without a word. But halfway through, Noah looked up. Miss Amara? She smiled. Yeah? Can we make cookies tomorrow? Only if your dad helps. Michael blinked. Me? Caleb nodded. You used to bake with Mom. The table fell quiet. Michael's hands curled under the table. Yeah, he said softly. I did. Amara didn't speak. She just passed him the Parmesan, like it was a lifeline. The moment passed, but the warmth remained. Later, as Amara packed up her things, Michael lingered by the doorway. Thank you, he said quietly. Not for me, she replied. For them. He nodded. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you come back? Amara hesitated. Because I know what it's like to wait for someone who never returns. Michael said nothing. In that pause, something shifted. It wasn't trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. As she walked past him, Michael watched her go, not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as the first person to step into his house and call it hollow. The next morning, for the first time in a year, Caleb woke up smiling. 3 weeks passed, and the Sterling mansion felt different, lighter. Caleb had started speaking in full sentences again. Noah was sleeping through the night without waking up screaming. There were moments, tiny, fragile ones, when laughter slipped through the cracks of that once silent house. Amara never pushed. She let the boys come to her, on their terms, in their time. Trust was a slow bloom, and she treated it like it was made of glass. Every small breakthrough, Caleb showing her a picture he drew of his mother, Noah asking her to stay for bedtime stories, was met with quiet patience and respect. But something else had started growing in that house too. A vision. One that came to Amara late one night as she sat on the back patio, watching the boys build towers with glow blocks under the stars. Children like these, ones carrying invisible wounds, needed more than therapy appointments and quiet bedrooms. They needed consistency, compassion, creativity. They needed what she had never been given. So she brought it up to Michael. Over coffee one Saturday morning, when the boys were at a swim lesson and the house felt unusually calm. She said it. I want to build something. For them. And for others like them. Michael lowered his mug. You mean a program? A foundation. She replied. Sterling Hope. A place for children dealing with grief, trauma, abandonment, art therapy, mentoring, peer support, foster care transition. A sanctuary, not just for survival, but for healing. Michael stared at her. Quiet. The kind of quiet that meant he was listening, not dismissing. That's ambitious, he said. So was Nexora. She shot back. He smiled, faintly. Touché. She leaned forward. You've got the platform. I've got the heart. The boys are proof that it works. That same week, they secured a small temporary office space in San Francisco, one floor above a laundromat, with peeling paint and second-hand furniture, but full of light and promise. And there, on day one, walked in Isla Torres, 17, foster care, labeled difficult in every file, angry, bright, distrustful. She slouched in the doorway with a bag of sketchbooks, oversized headphones around her neck, and a glare that dared anyone to speak first. "You must be Amara," she said flatly. "The lady who talks about feelings." Amara smiled. "Only when necessary. You must be Isla, the girl who pretends not to feel anything." Isla blinked, then gave a tiny, involuntary smirk. Amara didn't push, just offered her a seat and a paintbrush. "No rules today, just color." By the end of the session, Isla had painted half a phoenix wing across a canvas and muttered something about maybe coming back. 2 days later, she showed up again, and again. The girl who had once punched a teacher now sat cross-legged, sketching in silence, sometimes glancing at the other kids and biting back a smile. Something was working. Word spread slowly about the space, the art, the warmth. Sophia Reyes, a nonprofit coordinator from another youth program, stopped by with referrals and supplies. "You're doing more with this cracked old office than some places do with million-dollar grants," she said, handing Amara a box of used markers. "But you've got someone watching you." Amara frowned. "What do you mean?" Sophia hesitated. "Victor Lang, big name in AI, hates Michael. He's been asking questions about the foundation, about you." Michael wasn't surprised. Victor Lang had always loomed in the background, a wealthy investor with a smug smile and a sharp knife hidden behind his handshake. He and Michael had once competed for the same merger. Victor lost. He didn't forgive easily, and now, with sterling hope slowly gaining attention, Victor had a new target. "He thinks the foundation is a vulnerability," Michael explained to Amara one night as they reviewed grant proposals in the living room. "He'll try to twist it, make it look like charity is covering for failure." Amara didn't flinch. "Then we show him he's wrong. We build something so honest, so transparent, that even his lies fall flat." That night, she stayed late, reviewing budgets, drafting outreach plans. When she finally stood to leave, Michael stopped her by the door. "You didn't have to come back, you know," he said quietly. "I did," she replied. "Not for you, for them, for the ones like me." He nodded. "Still, I'm glad you did." They didn't touch. They didn't need to. But something had shifted. Again. Outside. The city lights blinked on like stars returning to a sky that had forgotten how to glow. Inside, on the wall of the new office, Isla had painted the full phoenix, wings outstretched, colors exploding. Beneath it, in tiny letters, she had written one word: becoming. The letter arrived on a Monday morning, hand-delivered by a private courier in a navy blue blazer, sealed with the Pierce family crest like something out of a storybook. But its contents were anything but fictional. Rachel's parents, David and Margaret Pierce, were filing for full custody of Caleb and Noah. Their claim was sharply worded, brutal in its assumptions, that Michael, buried in work and emotionally unavailable, was unfit to raise 2 grieving boys, that the incident involving Amara, twisted and framed as inappropriate and unsupervised contact, demonstrated poor judgment, and that the Sterling mansion, no matter how luxurious, was no place for a proper upbringing. Michael read the letter twice before handing it to Amara in silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she scanned it, her face tightening with each paragraph. They're blaming the boy's healing, she whispered. On the one thing that's actually helping? Michael didn't speak. His jaw clenched. And just like that, everything they'd built, trust, progress, stability, was at risk of being undone by legacy and fear. The courtroom was a pale, imposing hall in downtown San Francisco, its echoing ceilings and marble columns designed to make everyone feel small. Judge Clara Nguyen, composed and razor-sharp beneath her rimless glasses, presided with a calm authority that brokered no games. David Pierce took the stand with the polish of a man who'd played golf with senators. He spoke of concern, of emotional trauma, of wanting only the best for his grandchildren. Margaret sat stiffly beside her lawyer, fingers wrapped in pearls, eyes cold as winter glass. They presented photographs of the boys looking somber, taken during their own brief visits. As proof of emotional neglect, they referred to Amara as a woman of questionable credentials, as if compassion required a degree. When Michael finally took the stand, his voice was steady, but beneath it trembled a man trying to hold the world together with bare hands. I lost my wife, he said, eyes fixed on no one. And for a long time, I shut down. But my boys didn't stop needing me. I was failing them, until she showed up. He nodded toward Amara. She saw them, really saw them, and they trusted her before they ever trusted me again. That's not a liability. That's a lifeline. Then it was Amara's turn. She wore a simple navy dress and no makeup, her natural curls pinned back, her spine straight. The court hushed as she stepped forward, not with power, but with presence. I don't come from a legacy, she began. I didn't grow up in houses like this. I was a foster kid, a statistic. My little brother died in a state hospital because no one fought hard enough to keep him alive. So I fight now. Every day. For kids like Caleb and Noah. Because I know what it's like to lose someone and be expected to carry that grief quietly. She turned toward the judge. These boys didn't just need structure. They needed to feel safe again. And slowly, they started to... I'm not here as a therapist. I'm here as someone who knows what survival looks like, and what healing can become when someone believes in you. The room fell silent. Even Margaret's lips parted slightly. Judge Nguyen's expression softened for a fraction of a second before returning to neutral. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, she said, and Amara returned to her seat without looking back. But the day held another shock. As the hearing recessed for lunch, Amara stepped outside into the courtyard, only to freeze as she saw a woman waiting on the bench near the fountain, gray at the temples, wrinkled hands clasping a faded leather purse. Lydia Brooks, her mother, the woman who had abandoned her at age 7, the one she hadn't heard from in 27 years. For a moment, Amara couldn't breathe. Lydia stood, slowly, as if unsure of her own welcome. I heard about the case, she said gently. I wanted to be here, not for the trial, for you. Amara took a step back. You don't get to show up now, she said, voice brittle. You left me. I know, Lydia replied, her voice a blend of guilt and weariness. I've replayed it every day. I was sick, scared. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time. Tears welled in Amara's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You could have found me. All these years. I didn't think I deserved to. The words hung in the air between them. Amara looked away, the old ache rising in her chest like smoke. This isn't about you, she finally said. It's about 2 boys who deserve better. Lydia nodded. I know. And if you'll let me, I'd like to help, even if it's just watching from the gallery. Amara didn't respond. She turned and walked back into the courthouse, her spine rigid, her breath unsteady. But something deep within her had cracked. Not broken, but shifted. That afternoon, as closing arguments began, Judge Nguyen took everything in with a stillness that made even the lawyers nervous. She didn't rule that day. Instead, she requested a home assessment and psychological evaluations for all parties involved, including the children. But her parting words offered a hint of where she stood. Custody is not about appearances. It's about the child's emotional reality. And from what I've heard today, there is more healing happening in that household than harm. As the courtroom emptied, Michael placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. You didn't have to share what you did. Amara looked at him, eyes steady. They needed to hear it. And maybe I needed to say it. That night, back at the mansion, Noah climbed into her lap during story time. Caleb rested his head on her shoulder. And for the first time in her life, Amara realized this might be what home feels like. The first article hit the newsstands before the court's ink was even dry. A grainy photo of Michael and Amara walking out of the courthouse, taken from across the street, sat beneath a bold headline, Sterling's Foundation faces scrutiny, conflict of interest or savior complex? Within hours, blogs, gossip sites, and tech media outlets had latched on. Words like unlicensed, controversial, and unorthodox methods were scattered like broken glass across headlines. Victor Lang had finally made his move. Through carefully timed leaks, he pushed forged documents to a reporter at Silicon Watchdog, claiming that Sterling Hope Foundation had misused donor funds and hired staff without proper background checks. The foundation's bank account was temporarily frozen pending investigation. Vendors pulled out. And worst of all, parents who had once called Amara a lifeline were now calling in fear, asking if their kids were safe. Amara sat at her desk in the San Francisco office, hands trembling around a copy of the article, her phone buzzing with texts, voicemails, and vague legal threats. Across the room, Isla Torres was pacing, fists clenched, tears brimming. "This is garbage," Isla snapped. "They're lying about everything, about you, about us. They don't know what this place means to people like me." Amara looked up, her eyes glassy but calm. "That's exactly why they're targeting it," she said softly. "We're making a difference, and they don't know how to measure that in spreadsheets." Michael arrived minutes later, furious but composed. With Sophia Reyes close behind him, he dropped a printed statement on the desk. "We're holding a press conference tomorrow. We go on offense." Amara hesitated. "If we fight too loud, they'll twist it, make it look like we're hiding something." "Then we don't fight with noise," Sophia said. "We fight with truth, with stories." Isla stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let me speak." Everyone turned. "I'll tell them what this place did for me, what Amara did. They want a face? Give them mine." At first, Amara tried to stop her. "You don't owe anyone that, Isla." But the teenager shook her head. "You always say healing means being seen, so let them see me." The next afternoon, the press conference took place in the small community garden behind the foundation's office. The city skyline loomed in the background, sharp and indifferent. As reporters jostled for space near the podium, Michael gave a brief statement, measured, confident, refuting every allegation with clear documentation. Then Amara stepped up. She didn't read from a script. She didn't hold notes. She just stood there, hands clasped, heart exposed. "They say I don't have the credentials," she said, "that I'm not qualified to do this work. But let me ask you something. What degree do you need to sit with a grieving child until they fall asleep? What license gives you the right to listen without judgment?" Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. "This isn't about me," she continued. "It's about the children, about building something that helps them feel whole again." Then she stepped aside, and Isla walked up, 17 years old. No blazer, no practiced speech, just a voice that trembled and rose and cracked, but never broke. "Before this place, I didn't care if I woke up the next day," she began. "I was angry. I was alone. People looked at me like a problem, not a person. Then I met Amara, and she didn't try to fix me. She just saw me." She paused, blinking hard. "This place saved my life. So if you want to write something, write that." The crowd was silent. Not a question asked. Not a word spoken. By the time the footage aired on local and national outlets, it had already gone viral, within 12 hours. The clip of Isla's speech had been shared over 5 million times. Hashtags like Sterling Hope, We See You, and foster voices flooded social media. Celebrities, therapists, former foster kids, and even educators chimed in with stories of their own, praising the foundation's mission. Public opinion swung like a tide. Victor Lang, who had expected silence and surrender, now found himself under scrutiny for unethical practices in his own portfolio. His forged documents were traced to a shadow PR firm with a reputation for smear jobs. Michael's legal team moved quickly, filing suit for defamation and conspiracy. The bank lifted the hold on the foundation's account. Donations, real, unsolicited, and generous, began pouring in from every corner of the country. But amid the triumph, Amara didn't smile much. The stress had taken its toll. She slept less, ate sporadically, and though she never said it, Michael could see the fatigue behind her eyes. One night, after a board meeting, he found her sitting alone in the art room, lights low, staring at one of Isla's older paintings, a girl with her arms folded across her chest, surrounded by thorns. "You did it," he said gently. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "We almost lost everything, and I didn't know if I could carry them through it." Michael sat beside her. "You didn't carry them. You walked with them." Amara turned to him, eyes wet. "What if it happens again?" "Then we'll face it again," he said. "Together." The silence that followed was the soft kind. Not empty, but full of knowing. Outside, the garden lights flickered on. A mural of a phoenix now stretched along the east wall, painted by Isla, with help from the children. Its wings were outstretched, and beneath it, someone had written in gold, "Truth will rise." Amara reached for Michael's hand. For the first time, he didn't hesitate. The air was warm in San Jose that morning, unusually soft for late spring, and the new site of the Sterling Hope Foundation buzzed with quiet excitement. The freshly painted walls of the second facility gleamed in muted earth tones, and a community garden had begun to blossom behind the main building, tended by volunteers and children alike. Sunflowers tilted toward the light, and herbs sprouted from planters made of recycled wood, life blooming in places once forgotten. Amara stood at the edge of the garden with a clipboard in one hand, watching two little boys carefully replant a tomato vine that had fallen over. They looked nothing like Caleb or Noah, but their tentative hands reminded her of them. It had been 6 months since the press conference that changed everything. The foundation was thriving, national partnerships were forming, and children from all across the Bay Area were walking through their doors, many of them for the first time with hope in their eyes. But even as things flourished around her, something inside Amara remained unsettled. She had faced down courts, cameras, and smear campaigns, but some wounds were slower to heal. That became painfully clear when the front desk called her that afternoon and said, "There's a man here asking for you. Says his name is Henry Brooks. Says he's your father." The words landed in her chest like a dropped stone. Amara hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in decades. Her father had walked out when she was 8, just a few months before her mother disappeared for good. For years, Amara had imagined all kinds of endings for him. Dead, in prison, somewhere in Nevada with a new family. But here he was, apparently sitting in the lobby, asking for her by name. She almost told the receptionist to send him away. But something made her walk down the hallway instead. Slowly. Like each step pressed deeper into soil she had never wanted to touch again. When she entered the waiting room, she saw a man in his 60s, with weathered skin and tired eyes, holding his cap in both hands like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He stood when he saw her. "Amara," he said, his voice rough, like it had been scraped raw from the inside. She didn't answer, just watched him, waiting for something to make it make sense. "I saw you on TV," he continued, voice shaking. "Heard about the foundation, about what you built. I couldn't stay away anymore." Amara folded her arms. "You stayed away long enough." Henry nodded. "I know, and I don't expect anything. I just wanted to tell you that I was wrong. I was a coward. I should have fought to keep you. I should have tried harder. But I didn't know how to be a father. And by the time I thought I could fix it, it felt too late." His words didn't shatter her. They didn't soften her either. They just sat in the air, waiting. "So why now?" she asked. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "I swear, I wanted to see you. To say something while I still could." Amara studied him. He looked small in his guilt, smaller than she remembered. "You don't get to just walk back in," she said. "This isn't a redemption story. This is my life." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." And then, quietly, he added, "I'm proud of you." The silence that followed was long, but not empty, just uncertain. Amara didn't forgive him. Not that day. But she also didn't ask him to leave. Instead, she said, "You want to help? There's a broken compost bin out back. Could use a new lid. Third planter on the left." Henry blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He headed outside without another word. Amara watched him go, her arms still crossed, but something in her chest loosened, just slightly, like a knot pulled once too tight finally gave way. Later that evening, she sat in the garden alone, knees pulled to her chest on a wooden bench, watching as dusk colored the sky in soft purples and golds. Michael appeared without a sound, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and sat beside her without asking. "Eleanor told me," he said quietly. "Your father?" Amara nodded. "He's out back, fixing the compost bin." Michael smiled gently. "What do you want to do about him?" She stared at the sky for a long moment. "I don't know yet," she whispered. "But I didn't walk away. That's something, right?" "It's everything," he replied. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists when people have seen the worst in each other and stayed anyway. Around them, the garden glowed with solar lanterns, flickering like fireflies. Laughter floated in from the kitchen where the staff was cleaning up from dinner. Somewhere in the office, Isla was helping 2 younger kids design a mural for the new hallway. And for a moment, Amara allowed herself to breathe. 2 weeks later, the San Jose site officially opened to the public with a modest ceremony. There were no reporters, no cameras, just families, counselors, and a few dozen kids, many of whom had already begun calling the place the house that feels like a hug. Amara gave a short speech, thanking the staff, honoring the children, and reminding everyone that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a garden, one that required patience, and sun, and rain. Henry stood quietly near the back, wiping his hands on his jeans, tears in his eyes as he watched his daughter speak to a room full of people who saw her as more than what she'd survived. They saw her as what she had become that night. As the lanterns flickered on once more, Michael took her hand and led her down the garden path. "You've built something real," he whispered. "Not just for them, for all of us." And for the first time, Amara believed it. The sun poured over the garden like honey, casting golden light on the young oak tree standing at the heart of the San Jose site. Its roots newly settled in soil that had been tilled by dozens of hands, small and large, scarred and soft, broken and healing. It was a warm Saturday morning, the kind that held no tension in its breeze, no bitterness in its sky, only a quiet invitation to witness something sacred: growth. Caleb and Noah stood on either side of the sapling, their hands dirty from planting, their faces glowing with pride. Amara stood behind them, her arms around their shoulders, guiding them gently as they pressed the final handfuls of earth around the base. Michael stood beside her, one hand on her lower back, the other holding a small plaque engraved with the words, "From pain, something beautiful grows, sterling hope." There were no microphones, no media vans, just family, just staff, just children and parents who had walked through fire and finally found something soft to land on. It had been 3 years since Rachel's death, and today, under this tree, in this garden, surrounded by laughter and homemade lemonade, peace no longer felt like a stranger. It felt earned. The Sterling Hope Foundation had now expanded into 2 thriving locations. With a waiting list that stretched across counties, Stanford University had extended a formal invitation for partnership, offering research support and clinical collaborations to model Sterling Hope's trauma-informed methods nationwide. But more than that, something deeper had taken root: a culture of belonging. Isla Torres, now 19 and a full-time staff member, stood under a nearby pergola helping a group of kids paint mosaic tiles for the garden wall. Her hair was longer now, streaked with color and joy. She wore a staff badge and a paint-splattered apron, and her face carried the calm of someone who had once lived in chaos and learned how to breathe anyway. That afternoon, she would give a speech at a national youth mental health conference, her first time on a plane, her first time out of state, her first time being introduced as a youth leader in trauma recovery. When Amara hugged her goodbye at the airport later that day, Isla clung to her just a little longer than expected and whispered, "You gave me back my voice." Amara had smiled through the tears. "You always had it. I just reminded you where to look." Inside the main building, a new mural stretched across the entryway, a phoenix in mid-flight, wings spanning 2 walls, bursting with color. Beneath it, dozens of children's names were painted in gold. Some had graduated from therapy, some had found forever families, some were still figuring it all out, but they were no longer invisible, no longer statistics. And that mattered. Eleanor, who had since retired but visited often, called it a living wall every time she walked past it. She placed her palm on it like a blessing. Henry Brooks now volunteered at the garden twice a week. He didn't ask for anything in return, just the chance to show up. Sometimes he brought lunch for the kids. Sometimes he just repaired a bench or trimmed hedges in silence. But Amara no longer flinched when she saw him. She didn't call him Dad, not yet. But when she introduced him to someone, she called him Henry from the garden, and that was enough. For now, Lydia Brooks had visited once, quietly, and stood by the mural for a long time without speaking. Amara had walked her through the building without bitterness, showing her Isla's art room and the community library. They'd sat in the garden afterward, drinking tea in silence, and Amara had finally said, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this anymore." Lydia had cried, and Amara had not. She had already done her crying. And then there was Michael, no longer the cold, grieving man behind glass doors and stock reports. He had changed, not with grand gestures, but in steady, small ways. He cooked breakfast on Sundays. He took phone calls from the school. He started speaking at foundation events, not just as a CEO, but as a father who had failed, learned, and tried again. On the anniversary of Rachel's passing, he stood with Amara in the garden, the twins by their side, and said, "She would have loved this place." Amara reached for his hand, and he didn't let go. Months later, he knelt beneath the same oak tree and asked her to marry him, not with fanfare, but with full presence. "Not because I need fixing," he said, "but because you've taught me how to live." She said yes, tears streaking her cheeks, the twins cheering behind them. Now, as the garden filled with families and volunteers, as kids chased butterflies through rows of lavender and mint, Amara stood at the edge of it all, one hand resting gently on her stomach, the other shading her eyes from the sun. She was expecting, just a few months along, and hadn't told many people yet, but something in her had already shifted. A quiet sense of permanence, of legacy, of life beginning not in the absence of pain, but in the space where pain had once ruled and had been slowly, tenderly transformed. She looked around. Isla, laughing. Michael, talking with a new father. The boys, helping younger kids line up to decorate pots. The wind moving softly through the trees. And in that moment, beneath the sun, with her feet on solid ground and her heart open wide, Amara knew she hadn't just survived. She had grown roots and wings. Thank you for being part of this story. If something in it touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back soon with more stories that matter. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time.